Hey everyone, I am so excited to jump on here for my ink and my story with my beautiful guest. And I would love for you to share who you are, where you're from, and a little something about yourself.
Mhm. Well, aloha. My name's Rachel LeJeune. I'm actually originally from Illinois and then moved to Tennessee a few years ago. But right now, I am actually spending a year in lovely Maui, Hawaii. Uh, Came down here for a temporary job position and wasn't ready to leave yet when that was over. So I'm spending a few extra months here just enjoying the beauty that God has in Maui and the healing and season that God has put me here for. I'm taking it every moment of it that I can get.
Oh, I love that. Maui. There is a beautiful couple, and at some point, I believe you'll see one of them. They were part of our journey together, and I would love to. I think it's really important as you see us on the screen and you see different people sharing their story, how we connected. And back in 2016, we felt that, well, that's when we actually left California and moved to Jersey to work in New York. We became part of New York City Relief, known as City Relief now. It was to work with our homeless friends on the streets and in New York and to be urban missionaries. And through that journey, you were part of that team there too, coming to volunteer and be part of that. And you and me never got to, which is funny. You came all the time.
Yep.
I was having babies, and I would go on these certain days to be part of the bus, and then it would just happen to like miss each other. But you got to connect a lot with Alec, and what I think is crazy is here we are 10 years later,
Right.
and we're having a conversation together.
Right.
So I wanted to kind of open that door of the context. And I would, if you want to go ahead and share your tattoo now of whatever you want to share behind your tattoo, because it is about tattoos and opening the doors with that. So which one
Um,
do you want to share?
well, I have two tattoos. Both of them have stories behind them, and they were 25, a little bit more than 25 years apart from each other, timing wise. Let me see here if I can. So I'm not going to get naked here, but it's going to look like it a little bit. So this is the first one. Can you see it? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. This is kind of an adaptation of the Irish Claddagh that stands for love, loyalty, and friendship. And when I was in college, that was a very common thing. There were Claddagh earrings and rings, and it was just something I think back then in the early '90s, we we just liked that what it stood for, the love, loyalty, and friendship. And there was a season in my sophomore and junior year in college that I actually lost three grandparents and my 27-year-old cousin, all in a 15-month span of time. So it really sent my family reeling. I was born and raised in a family that was very tight knit. We did Sunday dinners together every weekend. We were very close all the time. And so losing, I grew up, my grandparents were my life growing up. I just spent all my time with them and weekends and summer breaks. And so they were just a huge part of my childhood and my upbringing. So losing the three out of the four of them in 15 months. And then in the midst of that, my cousin was killed in a car accident. So it just really sent us all reeling. And my family really, we were just grieving. And me as a college kid, of course, we want to find a way to express what we're feeling. And I think that's very much where tattoos come for so many of us is we want to express what's going on in our heart and we want a way to do that visibly. So for me, that tattoo came after that, just a few months after the third grandparent died, I started looking for a way to express what was going on inside me, and that love that I felt to them, the loyalty to my family, the friendship with my cousin that I was raised with. So I was looking at the Irish Clawda just as a symbol of something that was expressing exactly what I wanted to express. But I did a little adaptation of it using the sunflower, and because my grandpa was a big sunflower fan, that was his favorite flower, as well as the one grandma that I lost. They both were big sunflower lovers. So I got that in 1996, I guess it would have been. So yeah, 30 years ago. Time flies. The other tattoo I actually just got a few months ago, and I'm going to try to show it to you. Let me see if I can get the angle right. I'm going to have to switch my camera around. Here we go. All right. So can you see that the right angle there? Okay. So my dad, CS is my dad, obviously. Um, he was just my hero in life. He was my favorite person in the world. Here, sorry about that. It's okay. He was just my favorite person. And I when we were kids, me and my brother, he would sign cards to us, and he would always sign them CS like that with his initials. And that's how he signed, cards or things to anybody. But then he would put in parentheses, dad, when it was to me or my brother. And we lost my dad a little over 21 years ago. He was he was just a special person. I could talk for hours and hours about what made him special. But he was somebody that was very sensitive to the world around him. He was very empathetic. He felt other people's hurts. He carried other people's pain. He took that on himself. Just very empathetic. He was a champion for people. He would always fight for the underdog, or stand up to a bully, or stand up for what was right, no matter, what it might cost him. He was just such a sensitive and caring person. But he struggled with alcohol, and he struggled with alcohol, not so much from an addictive perspective, but he drank not out of addiction, but drank to numb that heaviness and that emotional pain that he carried. And especially when September 11th happened, he really took a turn for the worse after that, because I think he just intrinsically felt the shift that was going to happen in the world, and the things that none of us really knew what this meant long term. He just really sensed it. And he carried that heaviness, and he started drinking heavier after that. And I really do believe that was a big catalyst for him. We ended up losing him just a few years later, in 2004. So I was 8 months pregnant with my youngest when he passed away. So she never got to meet him. My oldest daughter just very vaguely has memories of him, because she was 3 when he died. So she has, just very fleeting memories of spending time with him. But my kids never got to know him. But it's interesting to me, over the years, even though they never knew him, especially my oldest, she's so much like him. She is just, almost a carbon copy of him, in that same way of standing up to the bully, fighting for the underdog, carrying that really sensitive emotion, that very empathetic and sympathetic heart. So he's a very special person, and I love watching him live on in my children. And a few years ago, when we moved to Tennessee, I was packing up a bunch of stuff that I hadn't gone through, and I found a CD that he had like made a copy of for me. And it had all of these samples of his handwriting on it because he had written the names of all the songs. So for a couple of years, I had been thinking about getting a tattoo in his handwriting. And I just never, I kept thinking, what's a good saying? What do I want to get? Trying to piece together words that were on that CD cover. Never could come up with it. So kind of fast forward to the last year and a half, my life has taken a lot of turns and transitions, and I can't begin to count the amount of times that I had wished that my dad was here for those. And as I was packing up my townhouse to move out here to Maui for this brief season, I unpacked my cedar chest, which is just kind of full of keepsakes. And I opened up this box that I hadn't opened in years and years and years. And I found a card from my dad where he had signed it. I love you, CS Dad. And the minute that I saw that, I knew immediately that's my tattoo. It's in his handwriting. It says "I love you." It has kind of the quirky funniness that that he used to sign cards to his kids, CS, just like he did everybody else. Uh, and so when I was actually back visiting my daughter in Tennessee back in the fall, she was getting a tattoo. We'd lost one of our dogs over the last uh, month before that, and she was getting a tattoo of his nose print. And I went with her to get it, and I started talking to the tattoo artist about, me finding this sample of my dad's handwriting and wanting this tattoo. And she says, "Girl, you're next." And I didn't have an appointment. This was a tattoo artist that was booked out for months in advance. And when she heard my story, she was just like, "Oh, we're doing that today." So I went with my daughter to get a tattoo, and I left with my sample of my dad's handwriting. We positioned it right here on my arm perfectly so that when I look at it,
Yeah.
I'm reading it. So many times a day, I'm looking and reading "I love you" from my dad in his handwriting. And it's just like having, it's like he took a pen and wrote it right here himself. It looks like ink mark on my arm. And so it's something that's so special and so personal to me that I'm going to get teared up just talking about it. So I've only had that one for a few months. So they're 30 years apart from each other, but both have extremely significant meaning to me.
I absolutely love, love, love what you were saying with just, I think that's the big thing that I want everyone to realize. And when it comes to our ink on our body, yes, they could be fun and playful, and they could be a drunken night, you get a tattoo. But a lot of our tattoos represent a journey that we have gone on. They represent something that shares a deep story to who we are. And it's a door opener to have a conversation when you are out and about. You may not know anything to do as you're passing somebody by, but you see a tattoo on their body and you're like, hey, that's an opportunity in that moment to pause what you're doing, turn around and say, hey, I saw your tattoo. Tell me about it.
Yes.
Um, it's so important that we take those times to do that. I know that life is busy and we can always have an excuse or a reason to rush and get things done. But that was one thing that Father showed me how important it was to pause and to take a moment, because you do not know the last time that that person has actually had a conversation, has had interaction, and it's important for us to do that. So that's a tearjerker on that one right there.
And the first one that I got, 30 years ago, I actually got it a little more hidden. So it hasn't sparked the conversations. Back then, I was actually considering going into the military, and so I had to get it in a place that it could be hidden, because I don't know what the rules are now, but back then you could not have a visible tattoo. I think that's probably changed over 30 years, but back then that was a consideration that I had to think about. So it hasn't been the same conversation opener because I got it in a place that was more obscure. But just in the few months that I've had this one on my arm, so many people ask about it, and it gives me a chance to share about my dad as a person and what was so special about him, and it gives me a chance to really share with them, just our story and a little bit about my story. And it, like you said, it opens up doors, and we learn very quickly that we have a lot more in common with this stranger next to us than we ever dreamt that we did. And that's the thing that opens the door to learning that, finding that out.
Yes. And it keeps your dad alive. He
Yep.
is more living now than he was then. And like, it's his continual story that you get to share.
Yes, absolutely.
And when I just got reminded that, and as you and me were having a conversation before we started, it makes me think of a tattoo that I have. I will be sharing my tattoos as I go on when it's my time to share. And this beautiful lady here, she was there in a moment that I so desperately needed. Um, I haven't honestly cried in a while around this stuff, so maybe it's just another time to. Um, but we were talking about how when you're going through something in your life and it's really, really hard to go through it, God is the one person that you can go to have those conversations with, those brave, angry, tear sobbing, raw conversations. And I was going through something in my life. We had just walked through loss of our daughter. And I was in a old basement in Jersey in our house, and I was screaming and yelling and cursing out God. And I was so upset with the journey that I was on, and how dare him put me through that and all of the things. And I said a lot of things that were hard to say to God, but I needed to be raw and real. And who better to be that with?
Yeah.
And I was getting ready to go to our celebration day, her funeral. And I walked up the stairs of the basement, went and got in the vehicle. And the second I got in the vehicle, I got a Facebook Messenger ding on my phone. And the crazy thing is, I wouldn't have opened it because I was like, I was not in the mood to connect with anybody. And I knew that I needed to. And I opened it up, and there was a message from you. And that message answered every single question I asked God. And I was yelling and screaming about in that basement to a T, all the way down.
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself, what? What's going on? Who's this person? And then I'm like puzzling all these things in my head. But in that moment, all I could think to myself was, I just asked. And within minutes, he responded. And he used you to respond.
Yeah. And I was a stranger to you. We had never even met before. Yeah.
That right there shows another way that God is always using, talking, connecting with us. You could have chose not to listen. You could have chose to held on to it for a while. We do that. Like, is this really God kind of talking to us? Am I gonna, overstep, or this person gonna think that I'm crazy? And I just want to thank you for not overthinking it. and just doing it, because in that moment right there, it is something that I've always held on to, that yes, when we do talk to God, he does hear.
And it was so powerful for me to hear your perspective on that, because I think we do have a tendency to question it, to overthink it, to wonder, like you just said, is it really from God? Is this person going to think I'm crazy? But, I knew I had met Alec a couple of times and just, knew on Facebook, knew through that, and knew what you guys were going through. And just remember that morning I was sitting on my back deck and I was just having kind of my morning worship and prayer time, and just, spending time with God. And that just came to me and in an instant. And I just thought, I don't even know her, but I knew I had to share that. Like, there wasn't even an ability to question it. It was like a blinking urgent message, from God. Like, you've got to tell her this. You've got to tell her this. So I just kind of went out on that limb and sent that to you. And so then to hear in hindsight that you had literally just asked God those questions and were angry and railing and reeling, and that was God's way of answering you. It made me more confident and more um, urgent to share things like that with people sometimes, that instead of stopping to overthink. And it made me feel like I've had situations before where I've done the same thing. I've asked God questions and I get answers. And I think, what? I never thought I'd to that question on this side of heaven. And somebody has sent me a message and told me a tidbit of information. And I'm like, wow, did you know I prayed and I asked God that question and I didn't think I'd ever know the answer. So I think it emboldens us to share with each other and be more open and be more, just transparent and vulnerable, to sort of step out, even when it's somebody you don't really know. I had a situation like that too, about a friend that had been killed in an accident, and I always wondered, did anybody ever share Jesus with them? This was like my best friend growing up, and and in high school and as a young adult. And when I got older, I started to wonder, gosh, he was kind of raised in a broken home. And did anybody ever share about Jesus with him? And I'll never know. He was killed in a motorcycle accident. And I thought I would never know the answer to that this side of heaven. And I got an out of nowhere Facebook message from somebody that we went to high school with, who had moved away and, hadn't had any contact with in years. And he says, "Did you know? I just thought I would share this with you. I didn't know if you ever knew. I went to visit Kevin, just a couple of months before he was killed. And we stayed up all night talking, and I shared my testimony with him and shared the gospel with him. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I just felt like I should." And I just wrote him back and I was like, "You're telling me this because I asked God that question and he just used you to answer me." So.
I when you were sharing that story right there, I'm like, I know this story, I think we connected on that. So guys, too, if you feel led to say something to somebody and you're like, should I say that to them? I'm not sure. To almost like a full circle. Say it.
Yes. Yes. Say it, especially when it's a good thing. Like,
Yes.
it, it's one thing if sometimes people get kind of weird with prophetic words and they'll prophesy doom and harm and sickness. And, if you have something negative to share, maybe pray on it a little bit longer and sit on it and make sure, that it's genuine and authentic. But if what you have to say is good, you
Yes.
can coming from God, and you can trust that there isn't a harm to just step out in faith and say that when it's, something that's a good thing. He had, no reason to fear sharing with me that he shared the gospel with Kevin, there was nothing negative to come out of that, but there was something really good to come out of it.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's how I felt with you. You know, the things that God shared and put on my heart that day to say to you, those were all things He wanted to say to you to comfort you, to know He was listening to you, to know that He was brokenhearted right alongside you. There's nothing to lose by that, but I think we do have a tendency to overthink it and really overprocess it. And sometimes God's just letting us be the messenger or the pass through, and He's bringing us into a blessing. He's bringing us into a story that 10 years later, we're sitting here still talking about a simple Facebook message. And 10 years later, we're sitting here talking because of it.
Yes, guys. As like you said, a simple Facebook message that forever holds something extremely dear to my heart. And it's it's just so key. And I love that you said, and I'm not going to go into a big thing on it, but just so you know, God is good and He is encouraging and He loves. So, words that God gives are going to be encouraging and loving. They're not doomful and gloomful and all the things. And I love that you said that because being prophetic myself and hearing God speak all the time on certain things when it comes to, hey, should I share this or that and I remember, Father, that one's a little like, okay, how do we flip that and bring a word of encouragement to the piece that I'm thinking or filling on? There's so many different ways to package it up to share it. So I love that you said that, and that's a good thing to remember. So
Yes. And I think sometimes God might give us a heads up that maybe there's a struggle coming for someone or that there is something that they're going through or going to go through. That for us, that's our cue to pray for them. And that's Him prompting us to pray and intercede for them. Not to run to them with a message of doom, but to pray and intercede on their behalf. And not to become here on Maui, they call it the coconut wireless, the rumor mill or the drama. You know what I'm trying to say. Sorry,
you're
it's I'm meant to be, creating a drama chain. It's meant to be, hey, I'm putting this on your heart, not so that you can get them worked up or upset, but so that you can intercede on their behalf and you can pray on their behalf.
Yes, because our words have power and they have authority. So when we speak words of life, not death, that we can literally, as we're praying and like you said, being there in that moment to just take time to do that. Father will use us all the time, like, being woken up in the middle of the night or different pieces of whatnot. And He's that person that's on your heart. It's 99 point probably 5% of the time it's to pray and be there for those moments too. So and then He'll make it very obvious if you need to communicate like He did to you and tell her
Right.
no. So
Right. Yeah.
I love
Sometimes.
it. I love it. Yes. So I would like to know if somebody is wanting to share their story and they're just not sure. What's a word of encouragement that you could give to them?
I think, everything we've been talking about is just great encouragement. There's so many people, especially like in this time here in Maui, I have discovered I can meet strangers every single day. And we have a tendency sometimes to just think, oh, it won't mean anything to them either. Or, they're not going to care if I talk to them or don't talk to them. But I just think, I've met so many people sitting on a bench to watch sunset and we start talking, small chit chat. And by the time we're done, we've shared something, you know, that we have in common, or a struggle, or a joy, or something. You can just find common ground with almost anybody if you're willing to just be the one to open the door. What I've really noticed and was just having a conversation about earlier today is COVID and the isolation that we all went through. I feel like it shut doors, um, kind of created this little protective bubble around ourselves, that, we did that during the pandemic, but we forgot to take it down afterwards. It's just still there, and people are not nearly as open to strangers and conversations. But what I'm discovering, I think everybody wants to be, but everybody is sort of waiting on somebody else to be the one to break the ice. If I go sit on a bench to watch sunset and there are other people sitting there, they might not say a word to me. But if I am the one, and I've been working on this myself, to be brave enough to be the one to start a conversation. And when, you're surrounded by strangers and nobody's talking, you can assume everybody wants to be alone and they don't want to talk. Or you can just very lightly start up conversation, and maybe they don't want to talk, but they'll be polite, and and then they'll just kind of answer your question and go back into their isolation. But what I found is, most people, if you are the one to break the ice and start the conversation, you can be sitting there 30 minutes later still talking to them, because they were just as hungry for that human interaction as you were. And they were just as moved by the connection that was made. And, the conversation was meaningful to them and powerful to them. But if you just sit quiet and let everybody sit quiet and assume everybody wants to be isolated, that is how everybody will be.
Indeed. It's true. It really is. So, it very simply, like you said, just stepping out and trying is key.
Right.
So.
You just be ice, and be sensitive. Maybe they are in a time of absolute introspective reflection, and what they want is to be alone. But most people that want that will go find a quiet, isolated spot to sit. They won't go sit in a park full of people. So you can kind of look around where you are and assume, if somebody's sitting in a public place full of people, they didn't go there for isolation. But they're still feeling isolated, and they're hungry for that interaction, and they're just waiting on somebody else to break the bubble. And so of course, be sensitive if they are open to it. Okay, smile, have a great evening, have a great day, and move along. But most of the time, I have found, 9 out of 10 times, people really are just as hungry for that human interaction as I was when I went there. And we both leave, blessed by the conversation, however long it lasted.
Love that. Love that. Love that. The last question that I want to ask you is, how can we as a community come around you and support what you are doing?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. That's a great one. I'm really in a big transitional season of life, so I appreciate that a lot. I've gone through a divorce in the last 2 years, and my children are adults now. So I've kind of been transitioning into, who am I going to be when I grow up? It's sort of been almost, like that sort of season again. One of the things that I would share really quickly is, actually, I've taken on a health journey over the last year. I have lost 98 pounds and counting.
Woo! I mean, come on, that's something to be celebrated right there.
It is, and it's work, but it has become something I'm so passionate about that it doesn't feel like work anymore. I use a program. I fought it for a long time because I kept thinking, I can do this myself. Oh, we all know how to lose weight. We all know, you just eat less and work out more, and I tried, but I'm a 52-year-old woman, and women, we face a lot of challenges in our bodies when we get into our 40s and 50s, and things that used to be easy are harder. So I just found I couldn't do it on my own. I needed some support. And so I started using this program that I love, and it has been life changing for me. And I found like it doesn't just change my physical health, but that journey and the mental change took for me to make those physical changes have turned me into a person that handles adversity different, a person that handles stress different, a person that handles life different. So, what I'm doing right now is actually stepping into a season of coaching and helping other people through that same program. And I've loved my journey. My mentors and coaches have made all of the difference for me. So, to answer your question, what I'd really love is I'm very specifically feel called to women. We, as women, we're taught to neglect our bodies, we're taught to put our needs last. And, we really, we're told on the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first so that you can safely take care of your child or, dependents traveling with you. But in life, we're not taught that. We're taught take care of everybody else first and yourself last. So I'm very specifically drawn to coaching women and especially mamas who have been taught that we really can be a better parent. We can be a better mom, and I want to be a grandma someday. And my kids grew up without grandparents. One out of their four grandparents is all they really had. And so they didn't get to have the upbringing that I had. So I really think so many of us start to think about that. When our kids are little, we don't think about our health and being here to take good care of our kids. But when we start to get my age, we start to think about grandbabies and longevity. And, someday I want to be in my 60s and 70s and still be able to enjoy my grandkids. And, so I really feel drawn to helping people who are, kind of in that same age of life that I am and that you are. We're mamas who have neglected our bodies, and helping coach them into whether it's weight loss or even other metabolic health issues that are stopping our bodies from working at the effectiveness and the efficiency that they should. So I'm really loving that journey, and that's a way you could come alongside me is just simply by knowing that, by sharing that. If there's anybody here that's listening and that resonates with them, have them reach out to me. I really want this next season of my life to be spent helping others the way that my mentors and coaches have just helped me, because it's changed my life in every way, not just with weight that I've lost, but in the way that I feel every day, the energy that I have, the mental energy that I have. It's been life altering. And I feel like that's a gift that I want to continue to pay forward to others so that they can live their life more effectively and their best life. That's, and you and I have been Facebook friends for years. And since the day I started my Facebook profile, it has said my mission in life is to help others live their best lives and see dreams come true. So this is just in my new season. That's how I am trying to do that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing that. Guys, you will find her information above this episode, and I'll put all the details there so you can reach out and connect and see what she's doing. There's so much to it. Like she said, I've been seeing kind of her posts and whatnot and her journey and what it's doing for herself and for others. It's like you said, it's so important for our health to. That was something that he started showing me a long time ago, that I need you to be healthy. If you're going to do all the things that my heart desires for you and that you desire to do. Like, I need you to be healthy to do this, because let me tell you, it's a lot less time to take care of yourself now than it is to take care of yourself when you're sick. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
it's such a blip on the radar in the grand scheme of life. If you need to spend 6, 8, 9 months, taking control of your health,
Yeah.
it might seem overwhelming to people, but in the grand scheme of life, there's so many years left to come, and they're going to be so much better if you just take that time to invest in your health and take care of yourself. It's going to be so worth it.
It really, really is, guys. So, I would love to just say thank you for getting on and joining me today and sharing your heart and your story around all of this. And I love how ink can bring a beautiful story so much bigger than we can even begin to fathom. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. You will see us again on the next episode. Connect with her. Once again, her information will be above, and she will encourage you, and you'll encourage her along her way. And we will see you again very soon. Is there anything else that you want to share before we finish up?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been just great to unpack and talk through some of these things together in deeper ways than we ever have before. I love it.
No, I love it so much. All right, everyone, have an amazing rest of your day. Bye.